Welcome back to the English Writer, unless it's your first time here, in which case, hello, I'm Andy, the English Writer. In this video, I'm going to look at voice in English, more exactly the active voice and the passive voice, using the reading we did in parts 1 and 2. When we looked at the news item about a young woman who married a prince. Poor girl marries prince. Now this video might be a little more difficult than the previous two, which is why I labelled it Intermediate Plus. But of course you can look at it anyway, and it's always something you can revisit in the future, if you want, when you feel a bit stronger in your English. Anyway, let us begin. First, this topic could get very, very, very complicated and very technical, but that would not be helpful for learning English. So I will do my best to make this relevant and useful for learners. Secondly, although many other languages have the passive voice, such as German, Russian and Japanese, there are many that don't. As far as I am aware, Mandarin Chinese, Classical Latin, Indonesian and many indigenous languages worldwide don't use something that linguists call the passive. So passive is just one way of showing what's known as agency. That is, who is doing the action. Like this, the dog bit the man. Pretty normal. The dog was bitten by the man. Ooh. Things change a lot for that man and dog when you change the agency. The who did what to whom. Third, in English, passive is more common in certain contexts and not common in other situations. Academic writing, for example, uses a lot of passive voice, whereas newspaper stories do not. Newspapers prefer the active voice, which is short, sharp and clear about who did what. We will be looking at a news-style story in this video, so we will mostly be looking at the active voice. And in general, the active voice is preferred by most speakers and for most situations in English. Or, should I say, most speakers prefer the active voice for most situations. And finally, in case you're wondering, not all sentences are either passive or active. It's only for transitive verbs, you know, the ones that take an object, meaning someone or something doing something to someone or something. Did I get that right? Okay. Got it? It makes more sense when we just look at the examples. Oh, and remember, this is for English language learners, not linguists. So, for the sake of clarity, I will not be cutting up all the sentences into more accurate chunks. For our sake, when a passive or active verb is used, the whole sentence will be labelled passive or active. Got it? Pedant. Okay, so let's crack on. Here is the text again. I've highlighted the active voice sentences in green and the passive sentences were highlighted in red. By me also. You can see how much is active, and this is quite normal for English, so maybe give you a good idea of how much active voice you should focus on and not stress too much about the passive. So how do we make those active and passive sentences? First, the active sentence is like this. Subject plus transitive verb plus object. Example. I made a YouTube video. Andy bought a coffee. That is, I did something to something. Yes. I bought is the doing. A coffee is a something I did it to. I bought it. I bought the coffee. And I made the video. The video is a thing. I did something to it. I did the making to it. I made the video. So looking at the story, that first sentence is an active sentence using the present perfect. A poor girl from Paris has married the prince. Subject is the poor girl from Paris. What did she do? She married the prince. The prince is the object of that sentence. And so in the second sentence, we also have an active voice. But that third one is a bit complicated. But actually, it's also an active sentence. However, let's make it a little easier to understand. The surprise wedding was the result of a long search by the prince's father to find a suitable wife for his bachelor son, and has now made the teenage servant girl the talk of the town. It's a bit long, so I've divided it into 3 simpler sentences. But the point is not lost. It's just we can divide our language like that. So in this case, I've divided it into 3 simpler sentences, but I've had to add appropriate subject pronouns and a suitable auxiliary verb. In this case, it is do. So, the surprise wedding was the result of a long search by the prince's father. He did it to find a suitable wife for his bachelor son. And it has now made the teenage servant girl the talk of the town. As for the passive sentences in this story, we have only 3 to look at. But, in fact, only parts of these sentences are in the passive voice. So, she was prevented from attending the royal dance. And we could add here, really, a phrase such as by someone, if we wanted to, but we don't have to always if it's not relevant or it's understood within the context. So she was prevented from attending the royal dance by her stepmother, for example. And this is one of the features of a passive. If you cannot say by, then it's not a passive. But you don't always have to say by. You have the choice. But it must be understood there is a choice. The second example I want to show you is she was helped by her fairy godmother. And here we do use the by her fairy godmother. She was helped. So we make the passive with the subject, she, for example, plus the be verb, in this case was, plus the main verb in the past participle, helped. And then the rest, by, blah, blah, blah. In the first example, that was she plus was plus prevented, and we imagined the someone, but we didn't name them. Same grammar. In the second example, we had she plus was plus helped plus by her fairy godmother. A perfect passive form. So that's it, the passive and the active voices in use in a newspaper story. And that's also it for this video. As I said before, I made this video to help learners of English as a second language. So things were somewhat simplified, but I hope this is still useful in understanding what we mean when we talk about active and passive voice. And it shows how we mostly like to use the active voice. So my recommendation for most learners is to really crack that active voice, not stress too much about the passive until you're comfortable. Let me know if you have any questions about this in the comments below, and please remember to click on the subscribe button In part 4 of the Poor Girl Marries Prince series, I will be looking at reported speech, which is the he said, she said, that kind of thing. And it's much more fun, I promise. Although I like active and passive voice, I admit it's not quite as exciting. So, come along, have a look, find out how to say somebody said something to somebody else. And until then, bye.